Hello, everyone. My name is Noah. This is my dad, Mike, and we are the Mental Cases. And today we are going to be talking about a more closed case of nerdism and nerdists, specifically in relation to the more recent movie Captain Marvel and the controversy that is spawned around it.
Yes. Um, Before we do that, we should give let's give our sort of a impression of the movie independent
I agree. I was
of
actually
of,
thinking we
of
start
the
like
nerd
that.
of the nerdists.
Okay.
And I think I expected this movie. This movie landed right where I expected it to be. I
Okay.
expected it to be about a B minus. I didn't have any great expectations. It was a filler in between the big movies.
Right.
So I expected a B minus, like an 80. It came in for me about 80. So it met my expectations.
Right.
So I didn't leave unhappy or anything.
Right.
I kind of assessed where I thought the movie was going to land. It landed there.
For me, it was actually a bit of an improvement from where I thought it was going to be. The trailers didn't really wow me, and what was in the trailers was just kind of like weird and flat. But ultimately, when we saw the film, I was far more enjoying of it. It felt far better, far funner than what had been portrayed in the trailers.
I think what made it, I think it's what made it hard for Disney and the MCU with this particular movie is that it's the one Marvel movie that has to put itself up against a DC movie and another Marvel movie. So it has to define itself against a movie. Before, in other words, that's been, as we said in one of the earlier videos, that's been DC's problem. DC has been defining itself
By the
by
other.
the other movies, by the MC movies, and so it hasn't been doing as well. It's trying like what's Marvel doing? Then we need to be like that or not be like that. And I think Captain Marvel is the first time a Marvel movie had to do that for DC. So first, it had to compete with Wonder Woman, which had already sort of taken up the feminist mantle of hero.
Right, the current superhero movie status of female empowerment.
Yes, it's having to justify itself against that movie, and it's trying to not be that movie.
While at the same time, kind of aping off what that movie was going for.
Right. So I think I think any of the difficulties that are in this movie are a result of that.
I would agree.
So
it
in other
comes
words,
across like that.
Right. So in other words, even like, so for example, Captain Marvel has to be sort of, have a little sass. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she has to have sass because Gal Gadot doesn't have sass. Gal Gadot is very European and Mediterranean and cultured.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Wonder Woman was far more like a cultured thing. Her comedy came from like her not knowing the world yet.
Right. So they had to define against it, and they also had to work against their own woke movie of Black Panther.
Right.
Which was the year before. So they were trying to recapture
both
things at the same time, and it was too hard to do because it had already been done.
Right.
If Captain Marvel had come out before Wonder Woman or Black Panther, it probably would have had
a bit of a boost.
Yeah, a better grasp of all that.
Right. And it also does in some ways feel like a Phase 1 movie from like the first Phase 1 because it's more or less just an origin story. But despite all that, it wasn't like awful.
No.
It was enjoyable to watch. I would put it above stuff like Thor: The Dark World or Ant-Man, which we don't even watch.
I thought having it taking place in the 90s was interesting, and I wonder if they were also competing with Wonder Woman with that. Because the next Wonder Woman movie is supposed to be taking place in the 80s.
So they wanted to jump on that. At least get that over Wonder Woman?
Yes. But I also think, and I don't know that I haven't read this, maybe this is just in my head, but I felt that the way they told the origin story was a slight homage to Pulp Fiction in telling it out of time sync.
Right. How we don't know her origin.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't get to her origin till the middle of the movie.
And
then it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, and I feel like they were trying to be a little 90s, but my guess is Disney was like, okay, you could be Pulp Fiction, but you only could be a little Pulp Fiction because we're Disney and it can't be that complex.
Right.
So it didn't exactly.
It has to be a bit more simplified than that.
Yes, but I do think they were trying to do a Pulp Fiction thing with the origin story.
Right, and I can see that
On an out of sequence timing.
Right, we're technically effectively in like the middle of the movie by the time it starts, like
Yes.
effectively time wise, you know. And then we find out about the origin story in the middle to eventually get to the ending.
Now I'm not a Captain Marvel fan either, so so now that didn't hurt the movie, but I wasn't all jazzed up either. I was like,
Right.
let's say they got it wrong and it was terrible, I wouldn't have cared. I was
Right.
never invested in Captain Marvel, so
Well, to be honest,
they couldn't lose with me. In a way.
right, and to be honest, the Captain Marvel name hasn't exactly been the most popular. It's not as popular as Hulk or Captain America
Right.
or anything like that, but it has been something within Marvel, and I could totally see why they would, start, bring her in. Carol Danvers is probably one of the most popular versions of Captain Marvel. That had only, I think, recently happened within the decade or a little before. But she's basically the one character with that mantle that has actually been relatively popular. So that's what they went for. And from what I've read of the comics, they more or less got her. They didn't do the comics injustice.
What did you think about the Samuel Jackson CGI?
It was.
We actually haven't talked about that.
I know. Honestly, I actually thought it was really good. There are always people who say, in this spot it didn't look that good. It's like, honestly, I thought it was like that part in Civil War where Robert Downey Jr. has CGI, and he looks like almost exactly how he did when he was younger. It's crazy how good they have gotten with certain CGI.
Yeah, that's what I'll say about it. I don't know if I liked it, but they've improved it. Like, this has gotten a lot better over time.
Right, and even Josh Brolin Thanos, like, he looks pretty damn good for a CGI character. Right. Like, you believe he's there and has weight.
True, but we all know, but it's difficult when you have an actor that you know from the past. Like, I was in the 90s, I was your age in the 90s, so I remember I know what Samuel L. Jackson looked like in the 90s.
Right. Admittedly, like, from your point of view, it's probably more noticeable than it is to me.
A little bit. There were times, but I wouldn't say I liked it, but I like where this technology is going, and they should keep perfecting it. Like, I want them to keep perfecting it, because nothing bothers me more than when you have characters being represented in the past and the actor doesn't look, sound, or act like the actor representing them in the future, or any of that.
Right, and you almost want, like, well, can't we just have the same actor but portray them younger somehow?
Right, I mean, they used to do that with makeup and whatever, but they don't want to do that, so they get other actors. But, like, this is a way of sort of keeping a continuity within a story, and eventually I think it will be fine. It'll be even better.
Oh, I agree. I could totally see, like, I don't know, like, years down the road we get a movie, like, or, I mean, God forbid, but, like, something akin to, like, a Back to the Future remake where you just use that CGI on the adult characters, and it could look perfect. It would be like, oh, wow, it's that actor is young, and I don't see the CGI.
Right.
Getting
back to the movie itself, I found it to be competent, but I didn't find it to be inspiring. I mean, it was okay. Again, I'm not a Captain Marvel fan.
Right. Well,
I mean, it kept my attention. I wasn't bored.
Right. That's
through the whole thing. I followed along. I was happy with everybody, more or less.
Right, and I would agree. I like what I was trying to say before is that I put it in terms of the Marvel hierarchy. I put it around like Captain America: The First Avenger and Iron Man. Like,
really,
pretty good movie. It's not the best version of that character, but it's fine. It's good. It's watchable.
See, that's interesting. You bring it up to the good. I would put it above the bad.
Really?
Like, I wouldn't say I would put it up with Captain America, but I would put it above Dark World.
Yeah, well, okay,
I would put it above Iron Man 2.
Right, that's what I'm kind of getting at. Like, I'm not saying it's above Captain America: The First Avenger or Iron Man, but I'm saying it's around that area.
Okay.
It is definitely above the ones where it just feels like such a slog to go back to. Like, though, it's above that. I would happily go rewatch this movie again.
Now, what are your thoughts about the Nick Fury cat eye controversy? What are your feelings about that?
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts about it?
Here's the thing. Going into the movie, I kind of suspected they'd do it as a gag. Like, they'd make him losing the eye a gag, because in reality, it's not the eye patch that's important, it's the character.
Okay.
Like, you want Nick Fury to be Nick Fury, and he was more or less a fun, younger Nick Fury in this movie. And that was fine. Is it kind of lame that he just gets the eye scratched out by the alien cat? Yeah, I guess, but I saw that coming. What I wish they would have done is that they would have amped it with more, like, made it more comical. Like, I would have
more
loved...
comical.
Yes, I would have loved it if, like, we get the part in the beginning where he almost loses the eye due to the car crash. And then later in the movie, one of the Skrulls is holding a knife to the eye he loses. And it's like, oh my god, is he going to lose it now?
Oh, like a running joke.
Right, a running gag. And then have the cat do it. Then it would have been hilarious, because it's like, that's how he loses it? And then, and I think they pulled off the after gag when Coulson comes up to him. It's like, did you really lose it from, like, the aliens? And he's like, yeah. I thought that was funny.
I think I'm okay with it because I didn't have any kind of headcanon about his eye patch, because he just always had an eye patch, so they could have said anything.
I think what most people are getting angry about is that in Winter Soldier he references the eye patch a lot and how he lost the eye. But actually, when you stop and think about what he actually says in Winter Soldier, it still applies to the cat. Like, his whole thing about, like, the last time I trusted someone, I lost my eye. And it's like, he trusted Goose to not scratch him, and he scratched it.
Right.
Like, it actually completely fits. And not only that, he's known for lying.
Well, this also might be a problem where Captain Marvel is trying to exist and define itself in relation to other things. So Captain Marvel's coming in between Infinity War
and
Endgame. So it's coming in between the two of the biggest, most serious Marvel movies, coming after the most depressing, existentially dark movie,
right?
Of the
where
Marvel
people
universe.
Literally cried.
So I can see, like, okay, we don't want anything dark, serious. We want it to be all sort of goofy,
uppy, and fun.
Yeah, up and fun.
Yeah, and a little bit. I kind of wish it was more of that. I think it does fall a little flat in its comedy. I mean, I'm not saying. Sorry, I'm not saying that I didn't laugh at parts or like jokes.
I think the movie was trying too hard. Because,
really?
Yes, this is what I think. I think. And again, I give it a thumbs up, but
yeah, same.
I think it was trying too hard because it has to justify its existence and define itself
by like 3 or 4 other movies.
Between the Avengers movies, Black Panther, and Wonder Woman.
Right. It had a lot staked against it, effectively. Yeah. But really, you say it's trying too hard. In certain cases, I think it's not trying enough. Like, I'm really, like, of any, little niggle I have with the film, I really wish it did more 90s references. Like, I would have loved to see, like, she walks past the TV and it's, like, old Nickelodeon.
Well, that's funny.
Or something. Like, we only really get Blockbuster and Radio Shack, and that's kind of it.
Well, one thing about, also, in past decades is that when past decades are represented in movies, it's very much a bubble in that only things of that decade that are remembered by children as being only in that decade are put into the movie. Whereas a decade's culture actually spans outside of that, it's beyond that.
Right.
So, for example, people are like, what are they even talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, for example, one of the things I'm into is Stranger Things, on Netflix, which is all about the 80s.
Right.
So I was a teenager in the 80s, so it's really comical.
Like, so you would know.
Right. So it's filled with all the 80s things. But, like, what it doesn't have is, like, so, for example, teenagers in the 80s were into, like, Prince, and they were into U2, and they were into whatever, 80s music. But they were also really into, like, 70s and 60s music. So, for example, lots of teenagers in the 80s, because I was one of them, were into, like, Led Zeppelin. Like, into Led Zeppelin. Now, Zeppelin's not an 80s band. Led Zeppelin's a 70s band. But lots of teenagers listened to Led Zeppelin. It was playing all the time. So if you were, like, in the 80s, you would hear a lot of Led Zeppelin. Even though that's not an 80s
Right,
thing.
and I'm presuming in the 90s you would have heard a lot of 80s music.
Yes, or something else, you know what I mean? There would be something, in there. So it's kind of tough to do it because it ends up becoming this very sort of insulated cultural bubble of let's just put things that are just from that time.
Right. And instead, even though, like, in reality it was far more...
So, for example, like, Michael Jackson was just as big in the 90s as he was in the 80s, even though he was, at that point, losing his glitter, if you will, because of the scandal. But he was still huge. Michael Jackson was still on the radio, on MTV,
Right,
listening to people's
and,
cars
like-
all the time. But you don't associate Michael Jackson with the 90s, you associate him with the 80s.
Right, and we don't get... And the movie, if I remember correctly, takes place in 1995. We get nothing on OJ. I don't
Yeah,
think.
where's OJ?
Right,
That would have been funny.
Right, like she's flying over the car.
Yeah,
That'd
that would have been funny.
That would have
OJ
been
references.
hilarious.
Where's the OJ reference?
Oh, that would have been so hilarious.
That would have been very clever. Oh, see,
Oh,
missed opportunity. Yeah, Disney would never do that. That's too controversial.
I guess, but it would have been
Well,
funny.
this is a good point to inject this idea that you and I have talked about, and that is the Disney zone. And this is
Right.
why all Marvel movies are like this, and this is where Captain Marvel lies. And the Disney zone,
Mhm.
what I call the Disney zone, is the space of quality that Disney is always going to aim for. So what that means is the good news is there's a certain level of crap factor that Disney is never going to put a movie beneath. They will spend more money and put something out and improve it, or just put it to DVD. They're not going to embarrass themselves if they can't get it there.
Right.
So there's a certain level of quality they're always going to rise up to.
Right.
And there's a certain level of quality they're never going to get above, because that's going to take a level of innovation and risk that they're not willing to take.
Right, I think...
Because Disney's trying to make money. It's a business.
Right. I think a great view of this is like comparing it to DC. Like a Marvel movie will never be as bad as like Batman v Superman or Justice League, but at the same time, it'll never have those really high moments of like Wonder Woman.
Right.
Right. It's never
Or The Dark Knight.
Or The Dark Knight.
Right.
Like it's never gonna reach those like existential questions and like
Right.
crazy stuff.
Because
that,
there's
like,
a certain
those
zone. The same thing is true about the Star Wars movies. The Star Wars movies are now in that Disney zone.
Right.
There's a certain level of, even Solo meets the minimum crap factor.
Right.
There's a certain level of quality that's always going to never let something go beyond. And Captain Marvel fits in that.
Right, I would agree. Like it could have made OJ jokes. It could have made like...
But OJ jokes would have been hysterical.
I know, that seems like such a lost joke.
Yeah.
It would have been great, like she's flying over the car, or like Samuel Jackson passes him, wondering what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Like he's on the highway. Oh, that would have been hilarious. But like Disney's never going to do that.
No.
No, Disney does not want to take risks. It wants to play safe and make sure it makes money.
Yes, and I don't fault it for that. It's a business. The purpose of a business is to make money. You don't want to keep making risks that are going to cost you money, especially when we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So I don't blame them for that. But there's a certain level of risk they're just never going to do. They're never going to get there.
Which ultimately means those movies will yes, some movies technically get into those really great spaces like Avengers and whatnot. Like most of the MCU is actually in the Disney zone.
Right, it's in the Disney zone. It's fair. It's good.
Right, it's fair.
It's not amazing, but it's good. That's why it's survived.
Right, that's why
mediocrity is the key to making money.
Apparently.
All right, so let's talk about getting back to our last video about nerdism and this. So the thing that really strikes me about the nerdist critique of Captain Marvel is that as much as they say it's about Captain Marvel, it's not about Captain Marvel. It's about Brie Larson.
Right.
It's about her
and her comments.
And her comments about critics and whatever. But it's her views that she's expressed publicly, and that is what the real hate is about. Because, and I say that because the whatever minor criticism that they inflate, I mean, all this inflation.
Oh my God!
About Captain Marvel,
right? We've heard it's an abortion of a movie.
I know,
like
it's ridiculous. Right? You can't even take it seriously. But there's a real. But coming from them, this is why nerdism is a real thing and real thing to think about. There's a level of anger that's coming from them.
Right?
They're mad at something. I mean, they're mad.
There's a visceral hate.
Yeah, you can feel the heat coming off the videos. It's so angry.
Right.
But it's really against Brie Larson and Brie Larson's comments.
Right, because some of her comments are basically about inclusivity, the empowerment of a female character, or or characters of color and everything. And the nerdists have been acting like this is the absolute worst thing ever. Like, how could Marvel hire this person to say these awful things when in reality she's kind of just saying we're mostly neutral, fine things.
And not only that, there's also this self-absorbed, it's all about me.
Right.
These things about me, about you.
Right. Like it's a key point that I don't think any of the nerdists get. when she made that comment about critics of 40-year-old white guys, whatever that infamous comment, she wasn't talking about you.
Yeah, you're nerds. You're at the bottom of the patriarchy. She's
Right.
talking about actual white guys with actual power.
Like the people,
not you.
The people in Hollywood that have a tough time giving black people or women an Oscar.
Right. She's talking about the people who support and like people like Harvey Weinstein and like
Right.
all of the horrible sexual harassment stuff that goes on.
She was totally not even remotely talking about you
and your basement and your action figures. She was not talking about you, man.
And how much hate she gets for that is bananas. Like, I feel bad. I feel bad for her.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, again, it's part of this sexism that runs through this critique. They can't take any kind of actual women being empowered. They can't take an actual woman, Brie, doing something
or a character
speaking out about something,
being empowered either. Like this fictional character that doesn't exist has now, for some people, destroyed the MCU. They're not going to go see Endgame because of this character and that she's been added. And it's like, are you serious? You are not going to see one of the biggest movies of the year over this?
Well, and are you really that threatened over an actress's comments about inclusion? You're that threatened by it. You're so threatened by it that
you are so petty that you are
there has to be
by
this
that?
Attack on an actual person,
right?
Because it's not. Because again, we have to stop pretending that it's about the movie or even about the character. It's about it's about the actress. It's about
Brie Larson.
It's about her and everything that she did and everything that she said. If she had kept her mouth shut, they wouldn't have said anything.
One of the things the nerdists are doing almost constantly is deflecting. They're using everything in their power to deflect their criticism of them and make it about the movie, about them, when it's really about their sexist views of Brie Larson and the empowerment she is kind of bringing or trying to bring.
And this is this is where it becomes morally questionable, in that this isn't an attempt. So let's call it what it is. This isn't an attempt to take down Captain Marvel. This is an attempt to take down a human being, Brie Larson. This is an attempt to put Brie Larson in her place. It's not an attempt to put the MCU in its place. It's not an attempt to put Disney in its place. Good luck with that. Take out the Disney empire.
Right, literally the most powerful corporation ever.
They don't care. Okay? It's really about intimidating Brie Larson into shutting up because she had the audacity to speak her mind and say something out loud.
And that's what's so screwed up, is that everything Brie has done since this movie or since her comment is analyzed and ripped apart by these people. There's not we're going into a bit of a different thing. It's there has not been a day where I think we haven't seen one of these types of nerdists come out with the Captain Marvel video. It's been a month.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's about nerdism, is a creepy obsession.
Right.
I mean, creepy.
There's a straight up a guy, I'm not going to name him, straight up a guy out there who has made 20 videos about how awful Captain Marvel is, back to back.
Yeah, if you've made more than one Captain Marvel video, if you're on your second Captain Marvel video, you're probably a nerdist. You don't even have to go that far down the line. 2. You're on number 2. You've crossed into a nerdist zone.
I would agree with that, because it's you really couldn't get all of your thoughts out in one.
It's just Captain Marvel. Honestly, if we didn't talk about this nerdist thing, we would have been done 10 minutes ago.
Right.
We've been going on because to connect it back to the other video. We're already finished with what we said.
Right, and it was a fine movie that's actually up to the standards of the rest of the MCU, and yet it's...
Although I would say minimally.
Minimally, right.
Minimally.
But, it's being attacked so viscerally.
Yes, and it's cowardly, because it's an attack on Captain Marvel to get at Brie Larson.
Right.
They don't even have the balls to, go after Brie Larson directly. And
right.
They gotta sort of indirectly attack this other thing.
Right, and, what's so screwed up, and what really, irks me, is that it's starting to affect non-nerdist people's mental like thoughts about
Yeah,
this
I
stuff.
mean, I can't imagine that people at Disney aren't honestly think tanking this, like for real, because it affects the movie going population, which affects their profit.
Right.
So they have to figure out either how to thwart it, or if they have to, go along with it. They're not going to They're not going to take it on the chin economically. They're not going to lose profit in the name of feminism.
Right.
So if this becomes a thing, they will try to curb towards it.
Right, and that's what sucks, because I don't, like, again, if the movie was fine, it doesn't deserve that. It doesn't deserve this, like, just, oh, we're just going to push this out of the way now because you all hated it. Like, that sucks. I think there's potential for Captain Marvel and Brie to get better. Like, and again, like, for, like, a more, personal, like,
or just to let someone watch it in peace.
Right.
Like, let's watch it in peace. Like, okay, like, I minimally liked it. Again, I give it an 80.
Same, more or less a B.
I grade up. I give it a B minus.
Yeah.
I walked out okay.
Same.
But I wouldn't deny anybody liking it. If I knew somebody who was into it, a little girl who wanted to dress up as Captain Marvel for Halloween, I would give that a green light. I wouldn't interfere with it.
Right. And
it's funny how it became such a cultural symbol of the culture war that nerdisms have declared. I mean, here's the thing: the culture war that's going on in fandom,
right,
was a war was declared, and they declared it. They act like they're the defenders of it, but they're not. Right. They're the aggressors.
They're the Axis powers. Yeah, they're invading Poland.
Exactly. They're the ones that you're all over the Philippines. It's you.
You're heading towards Russia.
It's not us. It's not anyone else. They declared this war and then act as if they're the victims in the culture war that they have initiated.
Right, and it, like, just to get back on a personal fan level, like, I'm going into Endgame. This is made before Endgame. Before we see Endgame.
Endgame's like a week from today.
And, like, I'm going into it like, if Captain Marvel is beat up, all of these guys are going to make a video how that was the best scene. And if she actually kicks ass in this movie, they're going to dog the film and grade it lower for that.
Well, that's, I was thinking too. I was even thinking it today before you came by, was that, you can't win. Like, I'm not worried, like, oh, what if Brie Larson is in this movie and she sucks? Now there's going to be all this backlash. Or what if Disney pulls back? They erase her out of like 10 scenes.
Right. We find out like there's 20 deleted scenes of Brie Larson.
Right. Because they wanted to reduce it, so they didn't. Now I'm sort of caught up in, like, I'm watching the movie that I didn't want to watch. I'm watching a movie that someone else forced them to make based on sexism and obsession and dysfunction.
Right. And it's just And that sucks. Like, just knowing that could be a part of Endgame sucks. And it just feels like it's never going to go away. Like,
well, no, we can't. That's defeatist. We don't want to be defeatist about it.
I know.
It can't go away. The thing is it's up to people. And again, this is another half-hour video. Why are we talking about this? It's up to other fans, and I feel male fans. Like, it's up to other male fans to stand up and say, this is inherently wrong. There's something dysfunctional and something immoral in this behavior.
Right.
And minimally, you're ruining it for everyone else.
Right. We need to tell the nerdists to shut up.
Yeah, shut up.
Just shut up and let us enjoy the movie.
Before we call some jocks. Get the jocks going.
Right. Get the jocks back on the internet.
All right. Well, I think that's enough on Captain Marvel. So, please like our video and subscribe, and check us out on Twitter and follow
us on Patreon
and on Facebook, and watch for future videos.
Mm-hmm.